I should say that despite this awakening that I had in the investigation that I was doing, I had no true concept of the depths of how white supremacy had already acted on me. I didn't really understand the depths of evil that I was dealing with. So part of my education was getting to those depths, which can be very depressing and difficult, especially for someone like me who believes in kindness, who values love and kindness and community and truth, because basically I have to investigate something that's the complete opposite of my values. And yeah, I've learned a lot because of that intentional investigation. Basically, now I find it's a time for me to share what I've learned. I think it's very hard for people to hear it because it's foreign to most people because most people haven't done what I've done, and so also I'm a Black man, right? So I'm not necessarily the messenger that people want to hear telling these things. So but to go back a little bit, I was still expressing white supremacy even while I was aware of it and investigating it. How was I doing that? I was discriminating against people. I was I stopped doing that by reflecting upon my own actions, right? Like why did I do that?
Oh, no, go back. How were you discriminating against people?
Like, for instance, I discriminated against bisexual people, for instance. Okay. I stereotyped them as being wishy-washy people who could not quite make a decision and whatnot. Now I'm married to a bisexual man, and so I kind of basically was like, you know what, I don't want to date a bisexual person because I don't want to deal with that, and I'm gonna have to deal with that if they're bisexual. It's just a story that I told myself about bisexual people, that was completely made up and discriminatory, and then I acted on that. And so these kind of narratives that we make up to other people, or to like stereotype them, and then to say, oh, I'm going to act like this and I'm justified to act like this because of this story that I made up and told myself about someone I don't even know, yeah, that's what I was doing, and once I was able to reflect on that, right, then I was able to change, and then boom, bisexual husband, right? And so the point is, it's possible, y'all, to change. But yeah, I was doing that. I was also experiencing, racism all the time, and I was explaining it away, because that's what I was taught to do. I didn't even realize I was taught to do that per se. It was just something that I had internalized, almost similar to the values that I described to you earlier, as like, hey, you don't complain about these things, you just get through them, right? Like, you just fight through. Eventually your hard work will be recognized, your merit will be acknowledged. We live in a meritocracy, blah 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 blah. I ate it hook, line, and sinker because
Me too, actually. I did too.
Yeah, it was reinforced. It was reinforced
the work
all
will
the way.
speak for itself.
Exactly, and that was reinforced all the way up until I got to undergrad. And undergrad was when I first experienced my work not speaking for itself. That people cared about suppressing me more than the work. Experiencing what that's like, being gaslit about it. I was experiencing all of those things consciously for the first time, but I was explaining them away as I was taught. And every racialized white person around me was helping me, which is who I was surrounded by in my college,
Right.
But even other racialized Black people helped me because they were doing the same thing, In my freshman year, there was a representative from the Office of Minority Affairs at the college who came to speak with me to offer support. And I actually laughed at him openly in the common room of my dorm with a bunch of other people present. Even though he tried to call me separately into a room to discuss this with me, I tried to make a mockery of the whole situation because my mindset at that time was that I'm just as good as these people. Why do I need something special? Like I found it was an insult, because I was that ignorant about our society and how I was being racialized and what that meant for my life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Deidre, exactly. Let me get on that. Sorry, because Deidre and
Okay.
I had a similar experience in undergrad with in the exact same class, Chaucer. And we both had a very similar experience with microaggressions with the professor. Identical story, basically. So it was interesting.
I would love to hear that. I haven't read
Yeah,
Chaucer
yeah.
in many, many years.
Me
So,
either. Me either. I
yeah,
haven't
yeah,
picked up,
okay.
I mean, it kind of got
But
soured. I kind of soured on it a little bit, after this experience. It was, I mean, long story short,
did
it
it have
was,
to do with the text, or did it? But I want to hear the story, so I'm not
yeah,
going to
the
ask any
story
more
was
questions. Yeah.
like, I signed up for Chaucer class because I was an English major. I graduated with an English degree, and it seemed interesting to me, and in this class, we would read the stories and we would practice reading it in the lyrical Old English, that it was written in. And
Mm-hmm.
she would teach us how to do that. Right. And then we would have tests, where we would have to, one-on-one read it, in that lyric. And she was very basically nothing I did was good enough for her, but in a way that it was like it didn't seem genuine. It seemed malicious, and you can tell when someone's giving you constructive criticism without that. It's if you ever experienced it, it's very distinct. It's hard to describe, but it's very distinct. Someone gave you constructive criticism from a place of good versus coming from a place of malice. And for her, it was very clearly a place of malice. In fact, it seemed like she was even fighting with herself sometimes to try to justify her own criticism, something I've experienced many times. And yeah, the last straw for me was being in one of these one-on-one sessions, reading it, and her doing exactly that, trying to criticize me, but actually being surprised at how good I was doing. These competing, things, probably a story that she was telling herself about me versus the reality of me standing in front of her, and me watching that play out. And, I got sick of that. I got sick of experiencing that. I didn't like it. It was uncomfortable. I didn't really know how to place it fully at the time. I didn't place it in a racism bucket because I was taught not to.
Interesting.
And then later, a student from the class, maybe like I withdrew, and then maybe like a week after that, a student from the class came up to me, a racialized white student, who was like, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you something that happened after you left the class because it made me uncomfortable." And basically, she announced that I withdrew from the class, and basically said I couldn't hack it, she was like, "Oh, you'll all notice that we're missing someone," like gave a whole speech about me being absent.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I still didn't put it in that box after that. It took years of reflection to even get there and really start realizing all the different things that have happened to me, which are many actually. And yeah, so that's the Chaucer story. But
And I would bet you that that professor sees herself as liberal, or saw
oh yeah,
herself as
100%,
liberal.
100%. She would call herself the biggest lefty. Like she was so proud of having written I believe a character in Star Trek, or she wrote an episode or something like this, and that was her claim to fame. And like she was very full of herself, and yes, I do believe that she considered herself a hardcore liberal. So
Right.
but yeah, like I walked right into that totally unknowing. But I'll tell you what the tipping point for me was, Carrie, when I was like, you know what, I really can't deny this stuff anymore, um or at least I have to change my posture
Mm-hmm.
in how I approach it. And that was, after all the many sacrifices, which I would take forever for me to explain and list, to get to a final interview with legal aid in Manhattan to become a criminal defense attorney with them. Um, that was the final straw, was that interview, because 3 different people had told me that it would be a formality, that I had already gotten the job, and that this was just a formality to go over stuff. That's what I walked into that interview thinking I was going to experience, and I walked out of that interview without a job.
So
And
because the liberal white people in legal aid were offended by you, were afraid.
Listen, I can't tell you the exact reason, right? Because these people never acknowledge what they're doing, right?
Did you feel
They just
hostility?
do it. Well,
I've turned this around. I'm interviewing you now, but did you feel
okay,
hostility?
no. Like, this is really good. I'm so glad you're asking me questions too, and I welcome it. Did I feel hostility? I would say initially I felt hostility, but it was dissolved quickly once reality kind of set in. Again, what I experienced was the same thing. A story that someone was telling themselves about me versus the reality of me sitting in front of them and actually existing, and them oscillating between those two things and not necessarily knowing what to do with it. This was probably one of the most prominent experiences of that, because I was told I was unprepared for the interview after a series of questions asked by this attorney in charge, racialized white woman, who hadn't read my resume that was on her desk that I could tell right away. And yeah, after like 5 to 7 minutes of her asking me questions about the work that was done, me answering them, and then getting to one question after she's getting more and more specific about their work, to one that you would really have to have worked there in order to answer. So I told her, I don't know the answer to that, but I really want to learn and learn more about it, And she was like, "You're unprepared for this interview." And I was like, I just kind of sat back, and I was like, because that was not something that was in the cards for me, is to hear that. I also, me, I value the truth, right? If I'm unprepared for the interview, I'll accept it. Okay. I knew I was not unprepared for the interview, so her words didn't faze me. I was just kind of like, what's going on here? So I was basically like, let's play a game. Let's play a game in real life. So I said, can you tell me why you think I'm not prepared? That was my question. Put it back on her, And she said, well, you couldn't answer my questions. I said, I answered every one of your questions except for the last one. And she didn't have any response to that. It's like she didn't even think that far. And I said, ask me again. She starts asking me the same questions. I'm giving her the same answers, but she's actually listening this time. It is dawning on her that I actually know what I'm talking about. I'm watching all that happen. And she apologized to me at the end of her questioning.
Wow.
Correct. She apologized to me for telling me that. The next thing she did was tell me she could make some calls to help me become a paralegal, for which you do not need a law degree, for which you do not need to go to law school for, all those years or go through several interviews with several lawyers to get to the point where you're interviewing for a final job. And she offered to make some calls to help me become a paralegal. And I didn't say anything this time. I just gave her a look, and she apologized immediately after that, for saying that. Then she asked me if I passed the bar, which I hadn't at that time. And she said, because of the hiring cycle in which I applied in and I hadn't passed the bar, I need to get a judicial order in order for her to hire me. That's what happened. And wow. I decided after that third one that I see what's going on here, and I don't even think I want this job anymore. And I did not anticipate any of that. So I walked out of that building, stepping into a life where I needed to reflect. On top of that, I'm a poor kid. I was a poor kid living in New York City. I was a New York City school teacher who went to law school. I didn't have the funds for any of this. I was literally homeless during my law school career. This was like it for me. So I had plans A through H that all fell through, and that was it. And standing outside that building, I was like, okay, so this stuff, I always knew it could take my life, but like now is real enough that I'm like, okay, no, this can really take my life. And I have to treat it as such, you know, and I can no longer treat it as if I can ignore it. I can no longer treat it as if, you know, I can rise above it, even if I can, you know, like that's not the issue.
Right.
So it gave
The
me
issue is
perspective.
it shouldn't be there for you to have to rise above. That's the issue for me anyway.
Well, the point was that it is there, you know, and that like I can't live as if it's not, you know, which is what
Ah,
people had encouraged me to do,
got it.
you know. So yeah, I had to let that way of living go, and that is what allowed me to fully embrace anti-racism as a value and kind of, you know, create the contraband wagon, put myself out there, share what I've learned, create conversations on race, and help other people work through their own evolution of race consciousness, because we all have one. Because from the very beginning, we all come out. We do not know anything about race. We get propagandized like both of us
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
You get the color stamped on your birth certificate, you know, and they put you in a box, and that box is connected to a generation song system of tyranny, of human hierarchy, of lies, of mythology, of dehumanization, of
Mhm.
despotism.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's what I'm doing, is trying to fight back against that directly. I believe the work that I'm doing, creating these conversations, is the most direct way to fight back, because that is why the government works so hard to control conversations on race. That's why so many states have laws right now restricting what you can say in the context of race.
Mhm.
You can't even uh, hurt white people's feelings by law when you talk about race, and so in many states. So yeah, they're serious about protecting that and making sure people remain in ignorance, remain propagandized, remain uh, good soldiers for white supremacy, white male
Mhm.
supremacy, you know. And yeah, if all I believe that creating conversations about this is going to go a long way, because the truth is that we've all been betrayed. We've been betrayed by our countries. We've been betrayed by our countrymen and countrywomen.
Mhm.
We've been betrayed. We betrayed ourselves, you
Mhm.
know, and people need the time and space to work through that emotionally, spiritually, and come out the other side if we're ever going to imagine a country that's better than this one, which
Mhm.
is the only way forward from this tyrannical port that we're at right now, where reporters are getting arrested. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so that's my evolution. That's where I'm at. That's start to finish.